All right, well, I want to welcome everyone here today. It is an honor for me to be standing up here with a bipartisan coalition of currently in attendance 10 solicitors and 18 sheriffs who drove from all over South Carolina to be here today for today's press conference. And if you will bear with me just one moment, I would like to read off the names and where they're from because I think it's that important. With us today, starting with the solicitors first and going in order of circuit number, First Circuit Solicitor David Pasco, Second Circuit Solicitor Bill Weeks, Third Circuit Solicitor Chip Finney, Fifth Circuit Solicitor Byron Gibson, Seventh Circuit Solicitor David Stumbo, Eighth Circuit Solicitor David Stumbo, 10th Circuit Solicitor David Wagner, the 11th Circuit Solicitor Rick Hubbard, 12th Circuit Solicitor Ed Clements, 15th Circuit Solicitor Jimmy Richardson, and 16th Circuit Solicitor Kevin Brackett. Joining us from our cadre of sheriffs, in order of county, Allendale Sheriff James Freeman is here, Cherokee Sheriff Steve Mueller, Chester Sheriff Max Dorsey, Chesterfield Sheriff Cambo Streeter, Hampton County Sheriff Anthony Russell, Florence Sheriff T.J. Joy, Horry Sheriff Philip Thompson, Kershaw Sheriff Lee Bone, Lawrence Sheriff Don Reynolds, Lexington County Sheriff Jay Kuhn, Newberry Sheriff Lee Foster, Oconee Sheriff Mike Crenshaw, Orangeburg Sheriff Leroy Ravenel, Pickens Sheriff Rick Clark, Richland Sheriff Leon Lott, Saluda Sheriff Josh Price, Williamsburg Sheriff Stephen Gardner, York County Sheriff Kevin Tolson. That is 18 sheriffs and 10 solicitors. I want to add that every single solicitor that was contacted wanted to be here. There were some who had irreconcilable conflicts. There were a number of sheriffs who had to back out at the last minute due to either weather damage from last night's storms or had another conflict that arose and weren't able to be here. But what I can say is every single elected law enforcement official that was contacted was interested in being here today because we all stand united in this issue. Now, this is a very diverse group of elected law enforcement leaders. They come from all walks of life. They represent every judicial circuit and geographic area around South Carolina. In fact, some drove several hours to be here today through inclement weather, and I'm incredibly grateful to all of you who chose to do that or were able to do it. We have some up here who are elected as Republicans and some who are elected as Democrats. Some are from rural areas, others from urban areas, heavily populated areas as well. Some have been in office for many years and others are currently serving in their first term. There are many people up here with wide-ranging and diverse views about many different issues, but despite these differences, we all agree, all of us, that there needs to be meaningful judicial reform here in South Carolina. Prosecutors and law enforcement, especially those of us who are elected, we reside in the executive branch of government. That is an important thing to note. It is the executive branch of government that is charged with upholding the rule of law and protecting our constituencies before courts of law. Now, here's the problem. There are three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. In the process of vetting, and selecting, nominating judicial candidates that the legislative branch of government will eventually vote on, there is no executive involvement whatsoever in that process. We're completely cut out of the process. We believe that the government governs best when its three subordinate branches of government have equal checks on each other's ambition. That does not happen in our current system. Now, I've spoken with a significant number of legislators who also share these concerns. And if you're looking for someone up here today to make someone the villain or the bad guy, I'm not the person who's here to do that, because I believe that there is common ground to be had with our colleagues in the legislative branch of government. I am pleased through the conversations that I've had with those leaders, with their willingness, the willingness of those in the legislature to have an open and productive conversation on a way forward for judicial reform. And we hope that today's press conference will be the first step in starting that conversation. I'm not personally endorsing a particular bill in the General Assembly that may be there or any particular idea. But for me personally, as I said earlier, it is important to me that the executive branch of government, especially when you look at the number of folks up here who are elected sheriffs and solicitors, that we have a voice in the process for determining who gets to sit in the seats in the judicial branch of government. Now, there's a lot of ideas and there's a lot of bills there. Some people have advocated for the federal system. Some have advocated for popular election. I'm not for popular election. Others may be. That is not what I'm asking for. Some have advocating for doing away with the JMSC. Some want to reform the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. I believe that there is the ability to reform it. Some want to remove the cap of 3 judges. Others want to do other things. But the point is we all agree that whatever is done, that the executive branch of government have equal say. Now, with that, I'm going to step aside, and you will hear next from Solicitor David Pasco from the 1st Judicial Circuit. Solicitor Pasco.
Thank you, General. Good morning. Again, my name is David Pasco, and I'm the 1st Circuit Solicitor, which is Calhoun, Orangeburg, and Dorchester counties. I'm going to be brief, and I'm going to echo a lot of what Attorney General Alan Wilson said this morning. We need immediate judicial reform in South Carolina, especially in the way we elect our judges. We need it now. I've spoken about this issue of reform around the state, and I can tell you that the governor was absolutely right in his State of the State address a couple of months ago, that the public's confidence is waning in how we select our judges. I believe the quickest way that we can both restore confidence and bring change is to call on our General Assembly to pass a statute, not a constitutional amendment or a change to the Constitution, but pass a statute changing the composition of the Judicial Merit Selection Commission, or as I'm going to refer to as the JMSC. If anyone needed proof that public confidence is waning and that we need legislative action now, when did any of you think that David Pasco, Alan Wilson, and 30 solicitors and sheriffs would get together and call for anything together, much less judicial reform? I assure you, as General Wilson told you, we're not alone. Every solicitor wanted to be here today, and I think most of the sheriffs wanted to be here, but they had scheduling conflicts. We all hold different offices. We're in different political parties. We all have diverse ideologies. But we've all gathered here today for a single cause that reminds me of something someone once said, whom John Monk covered early on as a reporter, Thomas Jefferson. Paraphrasing Mr. Jefferson, we've come here today to do our duty as public officials to convince our legislature that we are just friends and brave enemies. And together, we call on our legislator as friends to make changes to the JMSC by making it fairer to all the judicial candidates involved, by giving the executive branch a role in the JMSC, and by ridding it of lawyer-legislator control of the process. As I said, I've had the pleasure in the last year and a half to travel across this state and discuss judicial reform, and I've heard great ideas at every corner of the state. I see Representative Joseph White here today. He was nice enough to have me on his property in Newberry to speak to a group of Republicans. A Democrat speaking to the GOP in Newberry. And I've heard many great ideas. There are people out there that want public elections of judges. Some want gubernatorial appointment of judges. Others have called for a hybrid system, like my good friend Solicitor Brackett from York County talks about, known as the Missouri Plan, which involves both the executive branch, the people, and the legislature. They are all better ideas, in my opinion, than what we have now. But the thing is, to get public elections, or to have the Missouri Plan or gubernatorial appointments, that would take years to accomplish, if it could be accomplished, many years, because it would take a change in our Constitution. We don't have years. We need reform now. A couple of months ago, I'll fill you in on something, Attorney General Wilson reached out to me and he told me that he agreed with me and several solicitors Brackett, Hubbard, and Stumbo, my good friends, and a number of sheriffs like Leon Lott and Kevin Tolson, that he agreed with us that we need to have judicial reform and talk about judicial reform. And he asked me, David, can we put aside our differences and work together on this important issue? And I told him absolutely. And at least once a week, actually more often than once a week in the last 2 months, he and I have been discussing ideas and having brainstorming sessions on the phone about, what could be done. And like he said, we're not set into any one law or statute right now. But we have come up with some great ideas on what could be done immediately by simple majority of vote in the legislature. 2 laws, 2 simple laws we've talked about that I believe would drastically improve our selection process. First, legislation requiring the JMSC to screen out all qualified candidates for a vote in the General Assembly. No more of this 3-candidate limit set by the members of the JMSC. If you're qualified, you should be allowed to run in front of the entire General Assembly. Second, and to me, without a doubt, most importantly, a statute prohibiting lawyer legislators from being on the JMSC. By giving the governor appointment power for the JMSC, maybe with recommendations from the bar or others, we can end the practice of giving a few legislative insiders the power of picking the candidates, which is what I firmly believe is the biggest problem we currently have in our system in selecting judges. Finally, our call for change in how to select judges is not negative commentary about our current judiciary. I have, to the contrary, in fact, I have been in front of well over 50 circuit court judges, family court judges, and appellate court judges in my 30 years as a prosecutor, well over 50. And the vast majority of them do their duty with honor and they work hard. What I've been calling for is actually to give them more independence with a more transparent and fair selection process. A process where they are not looking over their shoulder to make sure they haven't offended a member of the JMSC that practices law in front of them. That's the system that I've been calling for. Does the proposed ideas that we have and that we've talked about or proposed legislation, does it make the system perfect? Absolutely not. Of course not. No system is perfect. But it will go a long way to ending the insider game on judges and giving the public confidence that the best candidate for the bench is being considered for that position. And it can be accomplished, my friends, with a simple majority vote in both houses instead of a constitutional amendment. Theoretically, it could be accomplished tomorrow. I want to thank you. I look forward to answering any questions you may have later, and I want to turn it over now to Sheriff Lott?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sheriff Lott. Oh, you want the change?
Okay.
Sheriff.
Not Sheriff Lott.
It's not Sheriff
I'm not
Lott.
Sheriff Lott. I don't have nice hair like you. Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Max Dorsey. I'm the sheriff of Chester County, the great county of Chester County. And General, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about this very important issue. I'm here today to speak as the sheriff of Chester County, but I think the presence of all these sheriffs sends a message that this is important to us. We are here to advocate for something maybe in words is very simple. I realize it's much more difficult, but we're advocating for the executive branch to have a seat at the table when it comes to judicial selection. There's been a lot of talk about reform. We use that word a lot, criminal justice reform. Our legislature has done a lot about sentencing reform over the past decade or more, policing reform. And what is reform? Reform is really changing things to make it better. And that's all we want to do. We want to make the system that we have better and improve it as we move forward. Now that judicial reform is on the to-do list of our General Assembly, we stand united as leaders in law enforcement, as not just cops and prosecutors, but leaders in our respective communities. And we're seeking a method of reform that includes the executive branch in the selection process. When people think about criminal justice reform, what do they think about? Well, they automatically think about the police. But the police has a very specific role in the criminal justice system, and there's so much more that goes into that. We have judges, we have solicitors, we have public defenders, we have clerks of court, we have court reporters. The criminal justice system is not just made up of cops and prosecutors. It's made up of so much more. And as law enforcement officers, we have been going through this process of reform. And the PACT Act that was passed here recently by the General Assembly is an example of that reform. And law enforcement in our state, we've been accepting of that. But let me be clear, the criminal justice system cannot be wholly reformed simply by focusing on law enforcement. There are other elements of this system that we must look at. And so I believe that the current composition of the Judicial Merit Screening Commission needs to be reformed, and the executive branch needs meaningful representation on the commission. And again, that is if the General Assembly chooses to stay with that method of selecting judges. There are all kinds of options out there. There are other states that are doing it different. Article 3 of the United States Constitution is a model that can be considered as well. I don't want this to appear that we are here bashing the General Assembly. We are a bipartisan group of cops and prosecutors who are not bashing our other two branches of government. They are critical and essential in our form of democracy. All of these men here and the men and women that represent solicitors and sheriffs in South Carolina have difficult jobs. But you know who else has a difficult job? Judges and our General Assembly members, our House members and our senators. They too have difficult jobs. And so we understand this is not easy. It is easy theoretically, as Solicitor Pasco said, but we know there's a lot more that goes into that. So I'm confident that the leadership of Speaker Merrill Smith and President Thomas Alexander in the Senate, I'm confident that those leaders over there will come up with a way to reform this particular part of the criminal justice system. So therefore, in summary, we are asking the General Assembly to pass meaningful legislation that allows for the executive branch's input in judicial selection. Thank you.
I'm Leon Lott, Richland County Sheriff's Department, and y'all are in Richland County, so I welcome you, where I hope you're safe. But unfortunately, we have lots of parts of our state that are not safe. And I think when you look at the underlying reason why we're all here is because we're public servants. All of us serve the citizens. Our citizens need help. They're being victimized every single day. Everybody wants fair justice, but they want justice. And we need to help our judges. And we talk about reform. It's really just modernization. That's all it is. We need to modernize the system that we've got because we need to make it better. We have a good system now. We've been doing this for many, many years. But as we all see, and we see it every day, as cops, we see the victims. As solicitors, they see the victims. We deal with victims. We deal with people every single day. The judges see those victims. The legislators see the victims. I think now what you see is a joint effort. It's not just all of us standing here today. The General Assembly, they've heard it from their constituents. They see it. They see it every day that you report where we have someone that's killed. We have someone who becomes a victim. It's all about protecting our citizens that we have in this state. That's what we need to focus on, not our individual parties or differences of what we got, but we all come in one thing, that we want our citizens to be safe. This is a way we can do it. This is a way we need help. They're asking for help. All of us here today is just representative of all the citizens that we serve that want help. They want to feel safe. We can provide that for them. We have to do that. You ask people today, do they feel safe? What do you think the answer is going to be? Again, the criminal justice system needs to be a team. that works together for our citizens. We're just asking the General Assembly to look at what we've got now, see how we can change it. How can we make it better? How can we make it more modernized, that we're going to do something that helps these citizens? If we keep sight on that, then we can accomplish stuff. When we lose sight on who we actually serve, that's when we don't get anything accomplished. And we're all here. All of us are elected officials. Everybody in the General Assembly is elected officials. The judges are elected. We're elected to serve the people. Let's do it. This is an opportunity to have that other voice, with executive branch being part of it, that extra voice. That's going to be a voice of the citizens. A voice for the citizens, to protect them, to make sure that they're safe every single day. Just like all of us are standing here today as a team, all of those who are not here today that are part of this team also are supporting us. The General Assembly can do the same thing. They can do exactly the same thing, work together to make some changes that's going to protect the citizens of South Carolina. That's our goal. That's our mission.
Thank you, Sheriff Lott. And I could probably let every single person stand up here and say something different about why we need to do this. And for brevity and time's sake, we're not doing that. Obviously, I would encourage members of the media to grab a sheriff or a solicitor to talk to them. But I do want to say this. I've heard back and forth about why we should or should not even tinker or address, reform, modernize, I like that term, the Judicial Merit Selection Commission process. A lot of people have said, well, hey, you just participated in a trial where the eyes of the world watched what was going on in a courtroom, and we saw the gold standard of judicial performance, and I 100% agree with that. But two things can be true at once. A system that can be improved can also produce good results, and equally said, we could produce anecdotal situations where it didn't work for us. The point is, the process can be improved, notwithstanding the fact that it does get it right. There are a lot of honorable men and women who serve on the bench that I and members of our team and everyone here stands before. And I agree with everything that Solicitor Pasco, Sheriff Dorsey, and Sheriff Lott just said. Everything that they said I agree with. But we can do better. This press conference today is not meant to be an attack, and it is not meant to be an indictment on those serving in the judiciary or the men and women serving in the General Assembly. In fact, I will tell you right now, I've had a lot of conversations, I'm sure many people up here have, with leaders of the General Assembly, high-ranking lawyer-legislator leaders who are very open to this conversation. You'd be surprised at the number of lawyer-legislators that are open to this. So this and legislators, not to distinguish between the two, but there are a lot of them that are fighting for reform and modernization of the process, and so we're not here to attack them. We're here to say we want to join you. We want to have that productive conversation, and we think that this is a good first step. Now, I want to close with this. JMSC reform is the first step. There are a lot of other components to judicial reform that we can talk in the weeks, months, and years in front of us, but this is a good first step. Let the executive branch sit at the table. Let us have a say in the screening and qualifications of those that we also have to appear in front of. So again, I want to thank everyone who is standing up here today. Some of you drove a really long way to be here, and I appreciate every single one of you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do every single day, because like I said, I think when you travel the state, and I know Solicitor Pasco has spoken to a lot of Republican groups, as you said, when I'm traveling the state and I'm talking to groups, the one thing that everybody agrees on, and it's a polarizing world, everyone agrees on public safety. Everyone. Doesn't care what your religion, what your race, what your political orientation or viewpoint of the world is. Everyone wants to feel safe and wants to raise their kids safely. And this is a general modernized reform that we can implement to get there. So with that being said, I want to thank all of you for being here today. We will make ourselves available for questions, but we're happy to take a few while we're up here.
While you're all up there, and I know you said JMSC reform is the first step, but does anybody support popular election of judges as an eventual step? As the best way, or would you? Go ahead.
The reasonable minds can disagree. I will speak for myself. I'm not for popular election of judges. There might be other people who are for that. But as for me, I'm not. But I would like to see the executive branch represented. Someone else might have a different opinion.
And to dodge your question, but what I've said to many groups, including at Representative White's party barn, I may be in favor of public elections, certainly over what we have now. But again, even if we could get enough people to support that, that would take years down the road, and it would take a constitutional amendment to change that, which is going to be very, very difficult. So what I'm in favor of now, and what I'm going to push now and work with others to do, is to get reform now. 2 simple statutes could accomplish the reform we're talking about today.
So.
Yes,
you're gonna
ma'am.
say that's simple, but when it comes to JMSC, nothing's simple. So what should the composition look like? Should it have any legislators on it? Should it include
No.
a certain number of sheriffs and solicitors? Should it have community activists? What should the composition look like?
Well, speaking for David Pasco, I would like to see no legislators on the Judicial Merit Selection Committee. None. I agree with the sheriffs and Attorney General Wilson that the governor should get a lot of, if not all, of the appointments on the JMSC. But the one thing that I would try to make sure of and ask for is that no legislators are on JMSC, because that's the biggest problem we have right now in our selection process.
You're saying it's too cozy right now.
Too many inside deals. I mean, you guys have seen it. You guys have reported on it extensively in the last several years, and that's all I'm going to
Do you
say.
object to the word cozy?
No, I think it is too cozy. I think there are a lot of insider deals going on with regards to the selection of judges, and we need to put an end to that. Now, in this legislation, in Attorney General Wilson's idea about having the governor, the executive branch, make the appointments, maybe with recommendations from the South Carolina Bar, the solicitors, the sheriffs, very much so. I mean, they represent every county in our state. That would put an end into that coziness. You'd have 2 different branches working at selecting our judiciary. You'd have both the executive with the JMSC and then the legislature still voting on them.
John, it cuts both ways, too. It's not fair to lawyer legislators or judges when a member of the JMSC or a lawyer who serves in the General Assembly, which they have a right to do, appears before a judge, and the judge makes a ruling that is favorable to that member of the General Assembly. And what if it's the right ruling? People observing it, optically speaking, it's not fair to them, because they're going to assume the only reason the judge did that is because, and I've had judges tell me that over the years, that they're nervous about ruling for the legislators because it's the right ruling, but people are going to question it. And so we want to protect all parties, including the judge, including members of the legislature who practice law, as well as the men and women who serve in the law enforcement community. So it cuts both ways.
In terms of timing, we've got 1 week of the House and Senate being on the floor before the crossover deadline. Is there any bill in there that y'all would like to see move, or does this need to be introduced? Is this a next year sort of thing?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, look, realistically, it's probably going to be next year. I would love to see it done this year. And Alan is right. He has talked to a bunch of lawyer legislators. I have talked to many lawyer legislators. You'd be surprised how many of them are in support of the change we're calling for. So, look, it would be great if someone like Representative White would sponsor a couple bills, which something tells me he's going to do this week. But getting them passed through both houses, that's going to be real difficult. Alan, you know that better than I do.
You're right.
Yeah, I'm right.
We're in it for the long game. Obviously, I'm not creating an artificial deadline. We're going to continue to work and advocate and raise awareness with our constituencies, continue to have conversations with legislators. I've had a number of conversations. He said I could say this, the speaker. I know he's had a lot to deal with the budget and everything, and obviously you got to govern right now, but these ongoing conversations have been very good, and I appreciate the time that the leadership has given us, and they're going to take up a lot of our concerns and have these conversations in the weeks to follow. So to follow on what the solicitor said, I don't think we're going to get it this year, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't start talking about it right now. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for covering this, and I want to, again, final thank yous to everyone who drove in bad weather to be here. And again, feel free as they're walking out, if there's a particular sheriff or solicitor you want to talk to and they're willing to, obviously we'd encourage that. But this is not the last time you're going to hear from this organization, from this coalition of people. You'll be hearing from us. So thank you so much.